Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Our mantra is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent those of the host of the station. And with me today, I have a nice young man, David Eliot, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Ottawa, where he researches the social and political effects of artificial intelligence. A member of the Critical Surveillance Studies Lab, and his work on AI has been recognized with numerous awards, including the 2022 Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation PhD Scholarship. He is author and writer of Artificially Intelligent, the Very Human Story of AI. I want to welcome you, David Eliot, to Chatting with Betsy.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me on today.
You are welcome. It's my pleasure. David, I am so excited about AI. And the first question I want to ask you before I go off on my tangent is what motivated you to write your book?
Yeah, I decided to write the book because, well, I'm an AI researcher, and all my friends kept asking me, what should they read to learn about AI, or, what do they need to know? And I realized there seemed to be this problem that although there's so many great books about AI out there, that none of them really seemed right for my friends. And my friends come from all different backgrounds of life. Some of them are plumbers, some of them are marketing executives, some of them are even politicians, unfortunately. But I really had a feeling that there wasn't anything out there that could grab their attention, something that was written for them, that didn't feel like just a dry technical manual. And I really wanted to provide that and give an access for your every person to be able to enter this conversation and come to read a book and understand AI in a new and interesting way that was also entertaining when you did it. So that was my goal when I set off to write Artificially Intelligent, was to make something that could help anybody understand AI and do it in a way that would be entertaining for them.
You subtitled your book, A Human Story of AI. I find that interesting. Why did you subtitle it like that? Is there a human element to AI?
Yeah, well, the way that we explored in the book and the way the book is written, it's really, in a sense, a popular history of AI. So I try and use the stories of the people who made the systems to explore how it works and what the problems are with it. And it was really interesting because when I was looking for how I was going to write it, how I was going to find this way that I could make it engaging, and I was doing my research, I started realizing that everything I thought was important for my friends to know about AI, I could find in a story of a decision that a human being had made. Sometimes it's a decision they made 10 years ago. Sometimes it was one they made hundreds of years ago even. I felt like that was the best way to explore AI, was to explore it through these human decisions, because not only was it fun, but I also thought it taught us that our decisions have consequences, and that the decisions that we are making now are shaping the future of AI, just as the decisions of the people from the past shaped where we are now.
Yeah, that's very true. And, well, you're talking to a middle-aged woman here, David. So I didn't even grow up with computers, but I do find AI fascinating. And you have a background in sociology, so how did you become interested in AI?
Yeah, so my journey into it really quite strange in a sense, because I started researching misinformation campaigns. It was actually my early research. And then I read this news article about a new system, a new AI program that could write like a human. And I'm like, that sounds like it couldn't be real. That sounds too good to be true. And this was 2019. And then I did some more research on it, and I talked to some people that live down in Silicon Valley, and they all told me, yeah, this is real, and it's really freaking people out. And somebody sent me an article where you could see what it was writing, and it looked really good. And I was like, oh, man, this is really going to change everything. And it turned out what I was looking at was ChatGPT 3 years before it was released to the public, back when it was just OpenAI working on the GPT projects. And instantly I saw it, and I knew that it was going to have massive implications And originally I started working with that on the implications it would have on news media and, the post-truth era and all of that. But quickly as I did that research, I realized more and more, oh, this is going to change everything. And there's kind of that opening up the window of getting to see, wow, AI is not something that's coming, it's something that's here. And I just got really lucky that I got to have my ChatGPT moment 3 years before most people and got to see the same thing everybody saw, I think, the first time I used ChatGPT, that something had happened. There was something new that had arrived. So I changed all my research and fully just started working on AI from a sociological perspective.
I think AI is wonderful. And I think it's just like anything else, David. In the right hands, used in the correct way, AI is going to benefit so many people. However, used incorrectly and for evil, then, it's not so good, just like with anything else. What I find fascinating, and I just read, I think it was last month in my AARP magazine, they had a huge, and I mean a huge article about AI and medicine and all these different scans and how it is detecting cancer early. Now, I myself, when I go for my mammogram, I get the AI. I pay $40 extra to get the AI. I forgot the exact name that they call it, but it's looked at through an AI, I guess, perspective. Of course, the doctor, radiologist looks it over, but they had an article about a woman who had this AI mammogram, and they detected breast cancer very early in her milk duct. So I believe that AI is really going to benefit medicine with all these other scans that they talked about.
I think you're 100% right, and I think it's actually one of the areas where it's easiest to see the potential benefits of AI and the way it can be implemented to society in a way that can really help us.
Yes. They had about different tests, doctors using AI during surgery. Some hospitals are having like robots, in there, or special type of lens. So I really think it's going to benefit medical science. I also...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'll let you finish there.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say I 100% agree with you on all this. And I think one of the big ways to look at this is I was recently at the Virtual Health Hub in Saskatchewan, in Canada, where I'm from, actually. So I'm from Canada, not Saskatchewan. But the Virtual Health Hub is really cool because they built it on Indigenous territory on the Dakota lands. And it's a hospital that doesn't service anybody in the hospital. It's basically a health hub for all these remote Indigenous communities in Canada, and they're beaming healthcare out to them, whether that's a general practitioner checkup or even now ultrasounds, which people from remote Indigenous communities in Canada were not coming in to get. And I talked to the head doctor there for quite a while, and he's really bullish on AI, and hearing his thoughts about all this was amazing. And this one doesn't come specifically from him, but on the mammogram topic, there's an interesting one with that of how we're seeing it used in more low-income communities now, more low-income nations, because instead of needing to train a doctor or have a doctor go into one of those communities, it can be much easier actually to create a job in those communities of a technician, of the person who operates the machine. And that doesn't take as much training or as much investment, but you can train someone in that region to do that. And then that data is shot off to a data center that hosts the AI system, and it processes it and scans for breast cancer. And that is a massive change in the access to medicine. If you think about just how many more people on this planet can be screened for these cancers every year, screened for these diseases, because it doesn't need to be a human who's doing the screening. We can lower the amount of investment that's needed for each screening. It is such an amazing application of this. And I think it also shows how the different structures of the industry that we're working within have an effect. Because in healthcare, one of the reasons you don't tend to hear people freaking out as much, rightfully so, is that it's not actually really taking anybody's job in healthcare. Because healthcare is somewhere where the human resources aren't efficiently used yet. We have so much more need for doctors. So when we talk about automating doctors, you don't think about laying them off. We think about using them to do other things. The fact that there's so many tasks that doctors wish they could spend their time doing, but they're stuck doing the tasks they're doing right now. So it's an example of a place where AI helps lift up society and helps empower the people in that industry, which I think is a really cool and really great example of maybe what we should look to of how can we take that model and apply it to other industries and apply it to other places so that we can integrate an AI or AIs into our systems in ways that lift us up, just like in healthcare.
Yes, I agree. I wish I would have kept that article. I didn't think about it until recently. I said, I should have kept that article for David Eliot's interview because it had all these different new advanced tests that are from AI and how AI is going to help medicine. So I'm, looking forward to that, with the AI helping people. They could detect cancer early, then people can live longer. They catch it. So I thought that's why I spend the $40 every year, David. It's well worth it to me,
Yeah,
and
it's a smart choice.
Hopefully.
One of those things where, we always keep the human in the loop of that. So I don't know how your system works, but most of the ones I've read of, you still have the human checking over every scan, but it's a much quicker check in a sense. But yeah, the AI can also catch stuff that maybe the human wouldn't. So it's it's a really exciting time to be working in that field.
Yes. And I have to share this experience with you about AI. This is the not so great part about AI. And I think, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, because like I said, I'm a middle-aged woman who doesn't know much about technology. Is AI, if a company uses AI, is it as good as the person who does the program? Like, I'm interested, how does AI work? Does somebody program AI like they do a computer? That's where I'm confused.
Well, you see, it's one of the reasons I actually wrote this book in the first place, is because just the question of what is AI is such a complicated and confusing question, and we talk about it as if it is a singular thing. We talk about it as we should just all know what it is. So that thing's AI. As if AI is a technology we can point to, like our toaster, and say, well, that is a toaster. But that's not actually what AI is in a sense, and there's no singular thing we can point to with it. It's one of the reasons why it's so hard to regulate, actually. Regulators have a terrible time trying to define AI. It can be kind of funny at times watching them try and make a definition of it. But the easiest way to think about it is that AI is a collection of different technologies and processes that are trying to replicate a form of intelligence. So they are computer programs that are trying to replicate intelligence in a way or act intelligently, and that can mean different things in different areas. But what we tend to refer to now as AI mostly revolve around a thing called deep learning. And deep learning is a technique for making these algorithms that really, it's been around for a while, but it really came to prominence in 2012. And in 2012, there was a huge revolution in deep learning that led to most of the systems we have now that we call AI. And what makes a deep learning algorithm different than basically any other algorithm that's come before it is that they aren't programmed by a human necessarily. So what we do is we're basically creating a framework that in a sense mimics how the human brain works. Not perfectly, not 100% scientifically, but that works in the same way that neurons learn. So we create this framework, and one would say right at the beginning that this machine is incredibly dumb. It cannot do anything. And actually, let's just put an example on here of, let's use the medical AI example. Let's say we're trying to detect cancer in scans. What we would do to train this device is instead of telling it what to look for, instead of saying, hey, you should look for, dark blotches here on the scan, instead what we do is we just take hundreds of thousands of examples of medical scans, and we would just label them maybe this one has cancer, this one doesn't. And we would show the system it, and it would have to guess, does this scan have no cancer in it? And at the beginning, it would just be guessing, yes or no. And after it guesses, we tell it, yeah, you're right, or yeah, you're wrong, or no, you're wrong. If it's right, it thinks, I did a great job, I should keep acting like that. If we say it's wrong, it will actually change the way it's programmed and it's wired. So it changes itself when it gets it wrong. And if you do that hundreds of thousands of times, millions of times in some examples, the program changes its own foundations. It changes its own architecture, its own wiring, until it can get the answers better. And it's basically trying to statistically predict, does this have cancer in it or does it not? To the point where when we get to the end, we can show it a medical scan, and it will go, I think that one has cancer in it, and it's right 99.999% of the time. And at that point, we freeze the program, we stop teaching it, and you can roll it out into the world. But what makes it really interesting is that we didn't tell it what to look for. And in many cases, in most cases actually, we don't know what it's looking for. We don't know how these systems work. They train themselves, they learn on their own, they learn to identify things on their own. They're not intelligent necessarily in the way we are, but they exhibit these traits and behaviors of intelligence which make them incredibly powerful. And then there's all these different types of AI. So most of what people talk about now is what we call large language models. So that's ChatGPT, that's Gemini, that's anything that's pumping out language to you. And they're trained in a similar but very different way. But their job is actually really interesting, is all they're doing is just trying to predict what the next word in a sequence should be. They're just really good at predicting what the next word should be, which is why when you ask them for facts, they often make things up because they're not made to search the internet, or they're not made to say the truth. They're just made to create a sensical string of words that they put together. They don't understand what they're saying. And in that sense, it's a miracle they get anything right. And that's actually incredibly impressive. But that's a little overview there of how AI works. But it's really interesting to your question of, like, are humans programming it? And the answer on one hand is yes, but on the other hand, no. Because we make the architecture, we build how the system's going to learn, and then we give it all the data that it needs to learn. So we have a lot of decisions to make here, and those decisions have a consequence in how it ends up working. But then it actually takes all of that and puts it together to create the system. And you have some AI systems that, when they're out in the world, they're collecting data from around the world on their actions and changing their system while they're interacting with people, while they're interacting with the world. So their algorithms, their programs, in a sense, are constantly in flux and learning and becoming better without any human intervening or telling them to.
Wow, that's amazing. It almost sounds like a sci-fi, like a sci-fi world in a way. I'm going to date myself here, David. Well, I'll be 68 in 3 weeks, God willing. And when I was younger, there was a TV show, Get Smart, with Don Adams. Mel Brooks, I think he wrote for it. He's a well-known comedian here in the States. You might have heard of Mel Brooks. Buck Henry.
I know Mel Brooks.
Yeah. Well, in Get Smart, back then, and you're talking the 60s, they showed, like, Max talking on his shoe phone. So that was like, cordless phone, and his watch. He would talk to his watch. And they also had robots that looked like humans. I mean, if you think about it, back then that was like, really make-believe. But now it's not so far-fetched to have a robot that is artificial intelligence created that looks like a human.
It's coming up real quick.
Yeah.
No, I laugh at it. I find it interesting. Like, that we tend to think of AI as being this incredibly new thing, but I had a very early wake-up call in my research when I first got into it, actually, that I came home all excited from university. I was talking to my mom about what I was learning, and, I'm studying this new fancy thing called AI. And she was like, what do you mean new? And I'm like, yeah, it's this crazy new thing. And she's like, no, David, like, AI is not new. And I'm like, what do you know, Mom? She was like, I worked on AI in the 80s. Like, I'm a programmer. I worked at an AI lab at a university. I was building these systems back then. And It kind of reminds us that these systems have been being worked on and imagined since really the 1950s is when the form that we imagine them taking, 1953, would be really the starting point. And we can see that in our pop culture. We can see that, as you say, as the robots in Get Smart or in Terminator, the entire film franchise built around us creating these systems. And it's really interesting to see how the way that we've been pursuing this for so long and the media that's come out of it has shaped our view of it and shaped, in many ways, our fears or our attitudes around it. I was really interested in, I was at an academic conference a couple of months ago, and they had a really cool talk on how in Japan they have extremely different attitudes towards robotics and AI than we do in North America. And one of the major reasons is the original films and stories about AI in North America were about these AI revolutions of these robots rising up and, coming to get us, which is like instilled this like distrust of like AI as something, we need to fear. And the robots in particular, is something that we should be weary of. They might try and get us. But in Japan, the introduction in pop culture was a TV show where the main character had a little robot sidekick. And it was a little girl with a little robot sidekick that went on adventures, and it was there to help her out and be her friend. And that created a completely different cultural understanding of, how we understood robots or how they understood robots. And it created more of an understanding as, robotics as a friend, robotics as a companion, instead of the North American robotics as scary.
That's true. And AI is like so in our culture. Like, you had Get Smart. Now, my older brother told me, I don't know if this is true, but he told me that the government, like maybe it was the CIA or one of those branches, went to the writers of Get Smart and asked them, how do you know this stuff? Like, how do you know about this? And it was such a funny program. But you saw it like then, and you would think, oh wow, you could talk, not on your shoe, but a cordless phone. Who knew that it would be created later on? And the robot, I Get Smart, was very smart, and he was like a positive, robot model. But then you had the movie, Megan, where the robot goes, wacko. There was another movie, and it just escaped my name, and they had AI technology in the house, and that turned evil. So it all depends, David, how it's depicted in films, out in the public eye, and then of course like Terminator, you see it not in a positive light. It depends if the robot is a positive role model, yes. But you go back to like when I was a child, I watched the Jetsons, which is space age, but even back then, they had robot. They had the guy would talk to his boss, what we would call Zoom now. So you could just see how it was thought about in the 60s. That's technology that we have now. Who would have thought you could look at someone and talk to them via screen on your phone or your computer or tablet? They didn't have that technology back then.
It's so amazing, and I think for myself, like I'm a pretty young guy still. I'm 28 years old, and writing this book, we go through a lot of that evolution. And to me, even the one that blew my mind was I had to write a chapter on the history of the internet, and that was just crazy for me because I don't remember a time without the internet. And I grew up with it, and I thought I understood it. I thought I understood what it was, and then the more I researched it, the more I realized I have no clue how this thing works. And all my parents' friends who were all programmers kept laughing at me whenever I tell them my stories about this, because the things that would blow my mind, they were like, you never knew that? like the fact that the World Wide Web and the Internet were different things, and that the Internet existed for long before the World Wide Web existed, and all these little things like that that just blew my mind of, being someone who's only ever grown up being so connected and having to think about, the time before that, but also how that connection has changed us and how that connection bleeds into this thing we're talking about now. Because, when we talk about Skype or we talk about Zoom, I guess, or any of these internet technologies, we're talking about this transferring of data. And I think we can easily forget that that's all this is, when we are on a Zoom call, it's taking that camera, turning my image into a bunch of zeros and ones, and then shooting that halfway around the world to someone else, turning it back into other zeros and ones that my computer reads as an image and puts that image back up on screen. And when we think about the actual implications of that data and how it's used and how that led to Facebook and all these other things, and then how now it's used to train AI systems, because so much of our world moves through the internet, so much of our world becomes data. And that makes it so much easier to feed into AI systems, to train AI systems on, and creates, to be honest, massive privacy issues as well, which we kind of have to deal with right now as a society.
Yes, yeah. Like, who's going to regulate AI? As far as, for lack of a better word, David, I'm coming up with the word rules. Like, I could use, for instance, I could take AI and I could have, say, I'll use you as an example, have an image of you saying something that's inappropriate, and people believing, oh, David Eliot said that's inappropriate, when it really wasn't you.
Yeah.
And then, that's the frightening thing about AI, that people can copy your image and have you say things that you wouldn't say. And that could cause a problem. So how, does the government get involved in regulating the rules for that?
Yeah. So
Canada might be different than U.S. Go ahead.
It's different between each country of this, and Canada's dealing with it in much the same way the U.S. is. I think we're pushing a bit further and a bit quicker. The U.S. actually, one of the most comprehensive pieces of AI legislation in the world, one of the first major ones, or actually the first major one, was Colorado. So Colorado has a really great piece of AI regulation, very similar to the one the Europeans use. But my overall feeling with this, and feeling of how we should regulate this, because there's always that problem if we come in and say we need to regulate this, and people go, you're going to stifle innovation. You shouldn't touch that. I think that's become a much more of a red herring. And I think what we need to not do is we shouldn't be dictating what should be built. We shouldn't be saying these are what's good, this is what you should build. But one of the major issues with this is that engineers are already controlled. Engineers in the sense that people say, oh, engineers just want to build things. And when you talk to them, they'll tell you that. But the more time I spend down in Silicon Valley, the more time I spend with these high-level engineers, the more I hear from them about their frustration on the projects that they have to work on. Because they want to build stuff that will help humanity, but they tend to end up working for financial institutions, for Facebook, for Instagram, for Amazon, for these companies that they might not actually align with their values, but they say they have the resources for us to build things, they have the money to hire us, that's where we need to end up. And what our market right now is promoting doesn't necessarily align with our values as people, because they need to be making money. You need to be competing. So if your competition is doing something not quite moral, but that's allowed, a lot of the time you find yourself needing to do that too. That's why we see so many of these companies engaged in very predatory marketing practices with data. It's why we see situations like Facebook, making it so many young women in the U.S. Turn to eating disorders and manipulating their behavior in that sense, knowingly doing that. And that's why people still continue to go and work for these groups. But the engineers would much rather be working on stuff like the medical AI we were talking about before, stuff that reflects our values. So what I think we need to do when it comes to legislation and regulation is we need to think about what are our shared values, what are the things that we want to see, how do we want this to be developed, how do we want it to help us out, and not fully restrain it, not say, this is what you need to build, but put rules in place to stop the darker sides of it happening, to stop the things from happening that will create these massive social problems, many of which we already know. As you talked about the deep fakes and these kind of systems, or in the European system, they have a tier list of different risk levels of AI. And at the top level, they have the stuff that they say, you cannot touch this. Nobody's allowed to build this. Nobody can have an AI that kills people. Nobody can have an AI system that does social ranking, that ranks people, like gives you a credit score based on, how nice it thinks you are, what you look like and all that kind of stuff. That's banned. There's certain things that are just completely banned. Other things that are higher risk, that have more rules around them to make sure they're being implemented in ways that lift us up. And I think that's what we need to talk about and what we need to have as we are recognizing that we are building the foundation of a new society. As you say, we're almost, it feels like heading into the Jetsons. We're having such monumental shifts to how we're organizing our society right now because of AI. So I think that we need to put these rules in place now, because as we saw with social media, if we try and put them in place later, the companies will have already built these systems and become too big to fail. But if we give them guidelines, if we give them guardrails to work within, so that they continue building AI systems, they continue having their competition, they continue doing everything they want to do, but they build them within our values. They build them in ways that work for us. And I think that's the most important thing we can be doing.
Yes, I agree. I have to tell you about my big experience with dealing with a company that uses AI. I can't mention the company's name, but they used to have stores in America. I don't know about Canada, but now they just they don't have the stores, but they do home repair services. And they went to AI, and it is not working. It is just, their AI isn't up to date. And even the people who work for this company, the technicians, they even said it's all AI, and it's just not up to date. They overschedule. They don't give the correct information. And with some companies, you can't even get through to a human being because it's AI. And what really cracks me up, David, because AI is not a human, they'll say, "You sound frustrated." I'm sorry. I had to crack up.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. I've had so many fights with AI call centers and these AI bots. And I know when I talk to business leaders, and I'm actually tomorrow going to be talking to a big group of business leaders about this, who are not AI people. They own companies from all different backgrounds of life. And it's, one of the big things is that there's a lot of predatory people out there trying to sell you AI that's not ready. It's just not ready. There's so much stuff that's not ready for the prime time, especially in my opinion, these more customer service facing tools. They just aren't ready yet. They're not there yet. But because it's the big thing and business leaders don't tend to understand AI, you have someone come into the room, show you this flashy presentation and say, it's AI, it's the new big thing. And, a lot of businesses, sadly, I think, can get really wrapped up in this. You hear about businesses laying off their employees to automate them and then finding out, oh, no, this doesn't actually work as well as I thought it did. And I'll point this out. This is really interesting, because one of the arguments you tend to hear about this is that the AI leaders are laying off employees. So they'll be like, well, the big AI companies like Amazon and Facebook, they're all saying, look, we're laying off all these people and replacing them with AI. It must be ready. Well, I had someone explain to me the other day, I can't take credit for this. So someone else explained to me the other day that if you look at all these big companies that are laying off thousands of staff for AI, they all have two things in common. They are all heavily invested in AI, and they all overhired during the pandemic. So if you're a company that's overhired and has too much staff, and you're a publicly traded company, so you've got to go to your board and explain what happened. Is it better to go to your board and say, listen, we overhired, we don't have the revenue, we need to lay off 10,000 people? The markets are going to panic. Or should you go to your board and say, hey, we need to lay off 10,000 people because we have this new AI tool and we're just going to replace them with that? Suddenly the laying off of 10,000 people goes from being a scary sign of bad financial health to being, oh my goodness, look at what we're doing. This is so great. Like, the company's working so well, and they get more investment because of it. So I'm always weary now when I hear about these big companies doing the major layoffs too. I really don't think it's ready for that yet.
I think that, I think, like I said earlier, AI is great, and if companies want to use AI, that's wonderful. But my suggestion is make sure it's up to date and make sure it works, because when it doesn't, and it messes everything up, and you hear a lot of people, say that, I can't get through to a human being anymore. What can business leaders take from your book? Because I definitely think everyone should read your book, but business leaders, I'm sure they can learn a lot from reading your book.
Well, yeah, on the one side, I really hope that business leaders take the same thing that I hope everybody takes from it, and that's a deeper understanding of what this technology is and what it isn't, and where it came from, and the potential pitfalls. Because there's so many potential issues with AI that, especially people in the world who are selling it try to stir it around, but it is there. We do need to talk about it. We do need to deal with it. And the last thing you want is for some of these issues to affect your company, like data bias. Data bias is a huge one. AIs very easily become racist. AI systems very, very easily. And that's something that, you need to be careful of as a company, that you understand why that happens, so that is a potential, and that you make sure that your system doesn't do that. You are defending yourself from that. So I hope they can take that from the book. But I also think there's more interesting messages and stories in the book, because the book really is a story, and I follow these human stories of people that made these big changes. And some of these people who are more recent, like Steve Jobs in this book, who's a very important player in this story actually, I think it's really interesting to look at how they made these changes, look at how they approached philosophies around computing. And in understanding that, I think it gives your business leader an interesting insight into the minds of these innovators, the minds of these big figures that are the reason we have the technological world we have now, and also helping us look forward and understand where are we going from here. And I think that can really help business leaders with, once you have all the understanding of the technology, I then in the book take you and try and open and show a bigger picture and look forward into the future and say, I don't think that the big, we're heading into a utopia or we're all going to die future is going to happen. When we drill into these details, what does emerge though? What things can we see happening in the next 5, 10, 15 years? What are the problems we need to worry about? And in some cases, what are the areas for opportunity?
Yes. I think really AI is going to open up a whole new opportunities for people. You have a chapter 22 called The Apple. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the apple is an interesting one, because I wrote this book 2 years ago, and the apple was not an incredibly relevant chapter when I wrote it, and now it is scary relevant. Because the apple was dealing with, we just had a chapter where I talk about the threats of AI when it's operated by companies, and the scale of data collection we're doing, the scale of data processing, and should we trust companies with all that? And I could almost feel my reader rolling over, and some people saying, what do we do? Do we just hand it over to the government then? I don't like that. Is that what this person's telling us we should do? And I felt like I needed to address that and address the thing that I don't necessarily trust the government either, and I don't think that that's the best option. And in order to express that, I talk about the way that governments have abused data in the past. And I use an example actually of, there's the famous one with computing that we tend to talk about, of the Nazis, and the way that the Nazis used IBM computers to process data, and the way that they used IBM computers and they collaborated with IBM to round up Jewish people in Europe and also to operate the death camps. But I draw a parallel.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
I highly recommend Edwin Black's book, The Holocaust and IBM, which is a scathing indictment of that corporation and their involvement. Wow. But what I bring up and bring into this conversation is that's the story we tend to talk about. But then I recently learned that IBM didn't just work with the Nazis. They also worked with the Americans. And the IBM machines were used to extrajudicially round up and process Japanese Americans. Now, not to the same extent as was done in the Holocaust, and they weren't being killed, but these were people who had not committed any crime, and these were people that were persecuted because of how much Japanese blood they had. They were stripped of their land. They were found stripped of their land, stripped of all their belongings, and then they were given surveys that they had to fill out. And those surveys were then processed by IBM machines to determine how loyal they were likely to be to the U.S. If you received a good score, you could go to university, you could do all this stuff. But if you received a bad score, they would send you to prison camps in the middle of the desert. So it's a very sad moment of Canadian and American history. The Canadians actually did the exact same thing. And what I found was interesting about this was two things now, looking at it now, because back then I was talking about even the good guys can do terrible things. We were the good guys in that war, but we did these terrible things. We talk about Alan Turing in my book, a hero that we are all indebted to, arguably the man who won World War II for the Allies. He's the father of computing. He gave us computing technology. And then in the 1950s, we found out he was gay, and the British government, for lack of a better word, killed him for it. The good guys can do terrible things too.
Yes.
Now, it's really sad because the exact law that I discuss in that chapter that they used to round up the Japanese Americans is the law that Donald Trump has been using with the immigration enforcement and with to increase the powers there. On top of that, we talk about in that chapter a program that I did not know was going to become relevant again called Atlas, which is an algorithmic program for looking at what U.S. citizens might be connected with terrorism or unruly people, and using that to it can actually revoke someone's citizenship. But we know from studies of this system that it did not work, and it led to people losing their citizenship or losing rights or being prosecuted that did not have any of these connections. And that is most certainly another system which is being used now to track people down and find them, or similar systems that have these same issues of it. So that chapter to me is it's a very stressful one in the sense that when I wrote it, it was a warning for the future. And then the fact that the exact things I was talking about in that chapter are now occurring, and you're watching these negative externalities play out and have effects on people's lives where, for me, I know how that system works. I know how the Atlas system works, and I know how those data banks are kept, and they're not kept well. So you see people being directly affected by this. So yeah, it's quite the warning of a chapter, and I think it's a warning that we all need to heed now in a sense when we think about making these laws of we might trust the government we have now, but we never know the government that we're going to have later.
Well, that is really interesting, David. How long did it take you to write your book?
It's a bit of an interesting one because really writing it only took me about 6 months. From the day I wrote the first chapter to the day I finished, it was about 6 months. However, it actually took me about 5 years. I wrote the research. First book. Yeah, research, and I wrote my first book in 2020, and then I put that book into a shredder because it was terrible. And I've known that I want to write a book like this for a number of years, and I keep coming back to it, but it's never quite felt right. And then this was the first time when I started attacking it from this perspective and this vantage point that I actually felt like it was right. So actually writing the book for 6 months, but yeah, there was about 5 years of research and attempts to write the book that came before it.
Well, that's what I so appreciate authors now, writers, since doing my show, because, we all pick up a book, we take it for granted, but what the author had to research and the time and the effort that it took them, he or she, to do the research just fascinates me. People dedicate years to writing a book, researching it.
I'm really happy you see that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me.
Because I feel like we don't see too, or I didn't realize the extent of how much writing a book is a team effort too. Like even when I'm done, before this book gets to your shelf, it has passed through probably about 15 human hands. There's about probably 15 people who have worked on this book between fact checkers, historians, line editors, copy editors, content editors, everybody who's making sure that book, when it ends up in the bookshelf, is as good as it can be. that it's not missing a citation, that it doesn't have a spell check, that it's as easy to read while maintaining the author's voice as possible. And I think that's something we need to remember in an age where people are talking more about, AI to write books or Amazon direct publishing and the death of the traditional publishing house, of that there's a lot more to writing a book than just an author sitting down behind a desk. And there might be one name on the cover, but there are so many names behind every book that make them possible and make it so they can have the impact on the readers that we're so fortunate that we get to have.
Yes, that is very true. I know we have to wrap up, David, and there's so many questions I didn't get to ask you, but I'd love to have you on again because I just find you fascinating to talk to. And where can people purchase your book? Let me say the name of your book. Yes, Artificially Intelligent, The Very Human Story of AI. Yes, where can they purchase it?
So you can purchase Artificially Intelligent anywhere books are sold, whether that be Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your local bookshop, bookshops.org, I believe is the name of a great local book reseller. Yeah, you can buy it anywhere books are sold. If you want to learn more about me, you can go to davideliot.org. Eliot has one L and one T in it. And you can also buy the book through there. We have a link to all the different stores you can buy it through. And I'll just say thank you so much for having me on as well. I'd be thrilled to come back and talk to you again if you ever want to have me back on.
Oh, sure. So they can, the audience can contact you at davideliot.com. That's terrific. And, I always, .org, I'm sorry, .org. Thank you. I always tell the audience, if you like a book, contact the author and tell he or she that you like the book. It means so much to them. Like I said, when you invest years, some people, in writing a book, you want feedback. And I wish you the best of luck, David, with your PhD. When do you get that you're a candidate now? When do you graduate with your PhD?
I'm actually done at the end of this academic year. So I've made a lot of promises to people. I'll finish it up, but this this book and this book tour has kept me a little busy. But I promised my dad I'd finish it this year, and I think my supervisor wants me gone by now too. So hopefully I'll be done at the end of this year.
Well, I wish you the best of luck. It was lovely chatting with you. Folks, all the information about David Eliot will be in the blog that Jeannie White writes, who Jeannie's the station manager and produces the show. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, who makes this all possible. And I want to thank Lessa Warren, Lessa Warren PR, who arranged this interview. And I want to thank you all for listening, subscribing. Chatting with Betsy is free to listen to on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart, Amazon Music. So please share the show. I'm here to help you, to help others know about resources. And we need to learn about AI. And we really do need to become more aware of the benefits of AI. I mean, there's always benefits and not benefits to something, to all things. So I'm excited about AI myself. And I really would like to read this book. Well, thank you again, David, for coming on. David Eliot, you're a nice young man. I wish you the best. And, folks, go out and buy David's book. Holiday time is coming up. This would be a great gift to give to someone. And as I always say, my show, you can follow me on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel. And as I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you could be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright, because we need it now more than ever before. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passion World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. Bye-bye now.